Fifth Street Asset Management has withdrawn its U.S. IPO, blaming stock market volatility. Fifth Street is the fund manager that oversees nearly $6 billion in assets. The company was seeking to raise as much as $208 million in the sale. The CEO was actually supposed to come on today, and he canceled mysteriously last night, so I guess this probably explains why.
No mystery.
Well, this is
now
about,
we know why.
This is about the third or the fourth company that was it Good that pulled their IPO, and we reported that GoDaddy and Zusk were both considering or looking to kick their push. Thank you. Push theirs off into 2015. So yeah, I mean the volatility has to scare someone away who's first trying to enter the market, right?
Yeah, but Zayo came out, Zayo Technology, they came out very well last week. But I thought what was interesting about this is that there was a piece about how they had increased their credit facility rather recently. I was looking this up, a $705 million syndicated credit facility, and that's at the end of September. So while they're saying that it is market forces that are leading them to pull their IPO, I wonder if there is something more detailed about the business.
Are you talking about sort of a restriction in the credit market?
Well, this is high yield, right? This is all the high yield business, and we've been talking about how people have been eager to try to buy bonds that pay higher yields. And I'm wondering, what you think that this may, in some way be a caution, a little note of caution in the high yield market or in the debt market.
You guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a hard thing to call, but, we've been watching high yield and we've been amazed. I mean, I've joked that, when your grandmother's asking you about the yield on a Colombian bond, you know that somehow it's getting a little frothy.
Carl Icahn spoke about it just yesterday at the Robin Hood Foundation.
He's been telling me all along, he's been very concerned about an asset bubble, and not just, in high yield and equities overall. He's concerned about the Fed and the inability to do things. He's got a pretty big hedge.
I mean, I'd be curious to know what he would have to say about the IPO not happening of a finance company that specializes in, high yield. Anyway.
All right, looking at Pandora now,
yes.
Because Pandora is giving musicians free access to the data it stores about their biggest fans. Starting today, artists are going to be able to view detailed information about their songs, breakdowns of the audience, and a map that shows where listeners are located. Okay, so here's what's interesting to me. On the one hand, I say, this shows you the commercialization of music, and there's a danger, of course, in all of this, that people just are trying to appeal to the crowds. But then the reality is that's always been there. That's always existed, whether it's record sales, whether it's videos. I mean, we got the guy who is the COO and president of MTV here. So this is, to a certain extent, always been part of the music industry.
I think that ultimately people want to be able to decide what kind of music they want. And services like Pandora have given them a massive amount of choice. But for artists, it's very difficult for artists to break out. If you think about years ago, it was about putting your CD on the end of an aisle in a store. Today, for an artist to know what kinds of people are listening to their music, which of the songs they're listening to, I think that's very valuable. There's something else that's not as well noticed, which is there are platforms like SoundCloud who have a lot more listeners than Pandora, and they give the artist a lot more information. So this is a very smart move for Pandora.
But is it, and maybe I'm naive in saying this, but doesn't it increasingly say this is less an art and more a science then? So in other words, if I'm an artist and I get all this information, I look and I say, hey, if I start that phrase with baby, baby instead of ooh, ooh, look, people like the song better. I guess I'm thinking of like political debates where they've got these monitors that show if a politician uses this buzzword, he gets this kind of audience reception. He should use the word investment instead of the word spend. And I guess I would worry if I'm an artist, like too much information would squeeze out the artistry of it all.
He's such a purist, isn't he?
No, but songwriters have always known. They know that, like, I get in, there's a hook in the middle of the song. I know that more people will listen to it.
But this is about the money.
Yes.
I mean, this is all about the money. This is the fact that the artist now is able to control the content, if you can, directly to the consumer. I mean, we interviewed Melissa Etheridge. She spoke about the same kind of thing. You go direct to the consumer now. There are no more record companies, right, spending their A&R budgets on any of this kind of stuff. As you just described, it's hard for an artist to find a way out of all of this stuff, but the musicians say, yeah, we like this, but this is about the money. I mean, Pandora is losing $40 million a year, right? I mean, everyone's betting on the fact that this is a company that's growth is going to continue. I mean, it's balanced on like a $5 billion market cap.
Well, but see, when you look at this, again, everything I do, I look at where it starts with the user. And how do users discover new music? And it's hard. It's not that easy. It's the genius on iTunes.
Because there's so many different places now.
Right. So if you're an artist and you know there are people who like your songs, your type of music, you can market to them. That's never been able to do that in the past. No one's been. It's always required a music company. It's required an iTunes or a radio station.
Okay.
This really sets the artist free.
I think it's, you make very good points. But staying on this theme here with quote-unquote artists, Justin Bieber, he may need to read up a little on Wall Street. New York Magazine reports Mr. Bieber may think JPMorgan is a person rather than a bank. The magazine bases this assertion on Bieber's reaction when he learned that the bank had booked a private room at Ping Pong Club Spin. He reportedly said, quote, "Why does he get the room and not us? Why does JPMorgan get that room? Why does he get it and not us?"
So had he been told General Electric or General Motors had the room, would he want to thank them for their military service? I mean, I guess like all the jokes sprang to mind of all the other companies he could have been told about.
The real issue is Justin Bieber's got a lot wrong. So, for example, given his recent arrest, somehow he thought 100 miles an hour was the speed limit. And so he really needs to learn a lot more.
I mean, you've been around so many artists when you think about, the career you had at MTV. Is there sort of, we have talked a lot about athletes and sort of this different standard and tolerance for behavior among athletes. Do you see the same kind of thing existing in the artistic community?
Well, whether it's Justin Bieber or Miley Cyrus, music is about being subversive. And so the more some of these artists act up, the more that their audiences like them. So I don't know if he really didn't know that JPMorgan was a person, or it's one of those things he just wanted to get quoted about. In the same way that Miley Cyrus isn't really a bad girl, she's just been made to look like a bad girl.
All calculated.
Exactly.
On Miley, yeah.
It's good that they don't go to the University of North Carolina, these people. Just, what would happen to them, right? That's the other big story,
we're talking about,
right?
there was a, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill had been accused of having academic fraud for some of the athletes. Attend, turning to Ben Bradley now. This is Ben Bradley, of course, the legendary editor who transformed the Washington Post into a leading U.S. newspaper. He died at the age of 93. Bradley led the paper's pursuit of the Watergate break-in story, which culminated in the resignation of President Richard Nixon in 1974. He had been receiving hospice care at home and had Alzheimer's disease. Biographer Walter Isaacson spoke to Bloomberg TV about Mr. Bradley's legacy.
Back when newspapers really mattered is when they had editors like Ben Bradley, who had a gusto to them and said everything's got to be interesting. One of his talents was he had a short attention span. He'd look at something and say, "That's boring."
So maybe he would have been a huge success online today too, right? Because you need to be able to have that same kind of editorial judgment. That's boring. That's good. But he leaves behind quite a legacy.
Yeah, when I saw the announcement last night, I was struck by something I'd heard once when someone else passed away, and whoever was commenting said, "I just want to applaud. I just want to clap my hands and say, wow, that's a life well led, a life worth living." I mean, to be in the middle of the Pentagon Papers, to be in the middle of Watergate, to make the Washington Post into something that mattered, to something that could compete with the Times and the Journal, which have largely owned the national newspaper dialogue for decades and decades. That's so impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's had a huge impact. And by the way, set an example for journalists for many years to come.